Okay, great, everyone. And no doubt many of you might be anticipating this, no doubt, awesome conversation that we are all looking forward to. And very important is the fact that developing an effective cybersecurity or information security programs can be quite challenging due to the evolving nature of cybersecurity threats and the complexity of our modern IT environments. And some of the most common challenges associated with developing effective cybersecurity or information security programs. We are talking about things such as dealing with ransomware attacks. We are talking about the IoT attacks, not to mention AI in terms of its good, its evil, the skill gaps. I mean, phishing, keeping up to date with the new technological developments, maintaining compliance, preparing for post-pandemic world, and the list goes on. There are so many complexities that are actually involved in this process. And in light of these challenges, then we as security practitioners, security leaders, definitely have to find ways to ensure that we are doing all that is possible to help the various organizations that we provide our services to actually operate securely, despite the various challenges that exist. And today in our conversation, we have Brent Deterding, CISO at AFNI, uh, who will be definitely taking us through what he calls Catch the Bad Guys early program. And I'm quite captivated by this. I mean, his approach to actually developing his strategy to implementing a security program within his organization. And many persons might be asking, what is this all about? I mean, how did he actually come up with this strategy, this program, this approach to your cybersecurity initiatives within your organization? So, Brent, thanks for taking the time to be with us today on Cyber JA.
Sure, sure. Thanks for having me.
Okay, great, awesome. And I really look forward to this conversation. And no doubt there are others who are actually looking forward to all the various insight that you have to share with us within our conversation. But before we actually get into the details, can you share with us, I mean, a little bit about your background?
Yeah, yeah. I have a little bit of a unique background amongst CISOs in that I worked for a vendor for 19 years. I worked for SecureWorks. I spent 15 years in operations and secure operations centers, all that, catching bad guys, right? And 4 years in a global sales overlay role. So I have insight from operations, incident response, marketing, sales, product management, all this. And one unique thing at SecureWorks was we did a couple thousand incident response engagements a year. We had a couple hundred people dedicated to threat intelligence, and we had thousands of clients to monitoring a list. So you get this like circle, and as a result, you do that for damn near 20 years, and you learn some things. And then I went and I became a CISO, right? And specifically a non-technical executive CISO. Like I spent 19 years with lead in my title in some way, and I had to set that down and say, I am no longer technical and be an executive CISO. But that's a bit unique, right? I mean, vendor side with exposure to thousands of clients for many, many years. Not only that, but sales. Like, so I went from like evil sales guy on Friday to like trusted thought leader on Monday. It was a bit interesting, but it gave me a very unique perspective that informs my overall philosophy.
Okay, great. A very um, comprehensive, I mean, synopsis of all the fun stuff, I mean, that you have all been doing over the years, which have actually, no doubt, prepared you for what you're dealing with now. And I mean, when you think about the role of a CISO, it can be quite complex, it can be quite challenging, quite involved, knowing that you're at a particular level, dealing with not just what you would term regular um, line staff or technical process, but you're actually dealing with the executives, the powers that be within these organizations. These persons are actually placing their trust in your hands in terms of ensuring that their organization, your operations, your business, is actually operating efficiently and securely. Not to mention that um, organizations today, in terms of the board of management, the structure is no longer what it was in the past. Persons are now becoming more what we describe as smart or aware as it relates to cybersecurity and the impact that the various breaches, cybersecurity incidents can have on their organization, not just from a technical perspective, but thinking about
Sure.
the financial aspect. We're thinking about compliance issues, all those obligations. So for sure, you're at uh, doing within acting within a role that is quite complex.
Mhm.
Now, as it relates to this catch the bad guys early program,
Yeah,
can you give us a background? What actually led to this approach? I mean, to your
sure.
security program.
So it actually came straight out of my kind of background with Securix, right? And so it's very, very hard in that world to differentiate yourself and to say, oh, I am different than this other provider, right? And so I used to approach it from a very, very basic perspective and say, there's this thing called the internet, and on the internet, there are bad guys who do stuff. Yeah, yep. And it is better to catch bad guys early in the kill chain than late in the kill chain. Yeah, I'm like that's what we do, right? So it started as a very easy way to convey the basic value proposition of what SecureWorks did, and then as a CISO, I'm like, well, you know what, like. Still want to do that, like that's exactly what I want to do, right? I want to like I want I want catching bad guys early or preventing them, as the case may be, to occupy as little of my time and as little of my budget as possible, right? Because in order to protect the business as opposed to secure the company, right? In order to be an executive, to be a risk person, and to be kind of a cyber person third, I can't focus a lot of my time or my team's time on catching bad guys. Like that has to be that. I mean, that's easy. And so, to some degree, given my background, I always found myself talking. I was trying to influence people to have my approach, right? Well, so part of me was like, man, if I could just do like one organization, if I could secure one organization, catch bad guys in one organization, that'd be easy. It'd be like going back and playing t-ball, right? And it is, quite honestly, like I did that for so long that it's not hard, and I don't spend a lot of time on it because it's just table stakes. It's like just knock that out, like catch bad guys, catch them early, don't have to worry about it, and that allows me to focus on like the meeting I just came from actually was how to how to have the discussion with the executives, with my peers, about risk tolerance, risk acceptance, timelines, how much insurance we need for business interruption, let alone cyber insurance, right? But just in general, risk to the business, right? And that's the conversation that I want to have. And that's the conversation that CISOs are able to have if you're not spending all of your time running around catching bad guys and figuring out where they went and all that. Like, I don't want to mess with that. And so let's catch them early. Let's knock it out, and let's focus on the harder stuff because there's plenty of harder stuff out there. So the easy stuff is catch the bad guys.
Okay, great. Quite interesting. Well, for many persons, they might be saying, "Oh, this seems so easy for you." I mean, in terms of what it is that you do, um, there has to be some amount of complexity that is involved. You must have actually gone through a number of experiences that allowed you to have come to this point to say, I mean, what actually have worked before versus what
Yeah.
actually doesn't work. So, can you take us along that line in terms of
Yeah,
those?
this is where I came up with when I was interviewing to be a CISO for the first time. I tried to come up with bite-sized ways to illustrate my philosophy on things, and so that's when I first came up with my four hills thing. I think it was 3 hills at first, then I modified it a little bit. But I said there are 4 hills that I will die on as a CISO, right? That like we either do these things or I lay down my badge and I say, I can't succeed in this environment, right? And the first of those was now it is a common saying, and it's accurate, that there is no 100% secure with any level of functionality, right? Totally understand. But there are a few things that you can commit the effort to get to 100%, right? And this is not a technology problem. This is a people process leadership problem, right? Take my first deal, which is 100% MFA. Every single user in my company has MFA. And I'm in the process of rolling out YubiKeys, which is like really, really good MFA, right? Well, that formed because I looked at what I saw clients getting chewed up by, and I looked at all the reports, be it Verizon data breach or SecureX or blah, blah, anyone, right? And saying, what's the best bang for the buck? What is the most effective thing you can do in security? And anecdotally, like we all know this. Go to a room full of cybersecurity people, especially CISOs, and be like, what is the best bang for the buck in security? And you know what? Almost all of them will instantly say MFA. Okay. I will push all my chips across the table and die on that hill that we will have 100% coverage on MFA. Okay. Well, let's say, okay, that's a good thing. Well, what's the second best bang for the buck? All right. And again, I'm initially not worried about China throwing a thousand bad guys at me. Okay. I'm initially going to say what actually costs people money. Right? We can look at Verizon data breach report referenced 30,000 breaches, loss events from 2022. What does all that data say? So it's, ransomware business email compromise with stolen credentials and phishing. Okay. So MFA goes a long way. YubiKeys go even further to knock all that stuff out. Well, what else? Well, let's do device posture management. That's my second hill, right? Which is a fancy way of saying I have a Microsoft conditional access policy that says you don't do anything anywhere on my network unless you're joined to my domain. Okay, cool. So now I have a reasonable expectation that you are who you say you are, and your machine is my machine. Okay, I'm not perfect, but I'm knocking down some big stuff, right? So what's the third? Well, I know the value of EDR telemetry. That has nothing to do with logs, nothing to do with the SIM. EDR telemetry, right? It tells me everything that I want to know. Like, kind of real basic. If I want to catch a bad guy, I need to see what commands he runs on a machine. Pretty basic. To do that, I need EDR telemetry. So that's my third hill. And my fourth is, well, the other vector, other than phishing and stolen credentials, is external, like exploiting an external box and hopping to the internal network. Okay, patching is another thing. We have the technology. Let's make sure absolutely every possible thing on the outside of my network is patched, configured, secure, all that. Like internal stuff, that's a bigger problem. I get it. External stuff, for me and my environment, I can delineate that and say, this is my external attack surface, and I'm going to make sure all that's patched. So those four things, is that the end all be all? No. But I'll push all my chips across the table and say, we are doing those things. And if we do those things, which are simple technology, easy people process, and cheap, just cheap, then I'll do those things, and then we'll step back, and then we'll have more discussions. But like those are the basic. Those are my four hills that are informed directly from what I actually saw all day, every day, and is reinforced by real data of where people are really experiencing loss. Like the chances of me caring one bit about DLP when I've not done MFA is zero. Like I don't care at all about that until I've done these basics. Once I've done these basics, then the problem gets way, way easier. right? I mean, every other problem becomes way, way easier when you knock out those things. And those things are pretty basic. They're easy to sell. They're not expensive. The technology exists and has existed for a long time. So do those things first. And I think, in my anecdotal observation, most people don't do those things. And if most people did those things, we wouldn't see the very same recommendations come out in all these reports every year. Like, what were the biggest problems 30 years ago in cybersecurity? Passwords and patches. We haven't really improved that much. Like, that's still some pretty big stuff, right? So, which is identity, authentication, and configuration patching. Okay, so that's really where I formed my philosophy, and I did that in my interview process. I'm like, these are my four hills. If we can do those four things, this could work out really well. If you say, I don't know about that, I'm done. Like, I don't want to work here. And
I,
I like
I
that approach.
Great. I mean, quite interesting. And so you're saying that this program that they've actually developed, your approach consists of 100% MFA coverage, 100% device management. We're talking about 100% EDR, XDR, all external vulnerabilities patched within 72 hours.
Yep.
When I look at all of these are not anything in terms of controls or approaches or that are actually unique to a security program. And the question would be, why is it that not all persons are actually taking this approach in terms of making things as simple based on how it is that they have actually explain this to us. What actually drove you to actually identify these control mechanisms to be the ideal from among all the various control methods that we have? In secondly, in
Because
relation to not grabbing a particular framework, there are so many frameworks that are actually established. So someone might be saying, why not just implement, for example, the NIST cybersecurity framework versus
yeah.
um,
Uh, so I have to choose my words carefully because I'm not mad at frameworks. Frameworks are fine, right? Frameworks can be very useful, uh, but I don't. The intent of frameworks is not like, oh, this is what your roadmap should be, and you weigh everything equally, right? Everything should be customized to your organization, and I think for almost not every, but for almost every organization out there, you look at what are the most cost effective, what are the best bang for the buck things that you can do, and you'll come back to my four hills, right? You'll come back to MFA, device posture, right? Which are the foundations of zero trust, by the way, right? That you can do simply, easily, and cheaply. Um, and you'll come back to those things. So that's really where it started. Is like, okay, like I don't need to talk about, I don't need to analyze, I don't need to do anything to say MFA is a good thing. Go do MFA, right? Because it's the number one recommendation all the time from all the reports, right? Okay, so what's number two? Oh, what's number three? What's number four? And could there be five? Sure. I'm not mad, right? Like, keep on going. But let's start with the bare minimums, bare basics, because it's not arrogant and it's not silly to say that if everyone had 100% coverage on MFA and 100% and device posture, or even just do MFA and EDR, do MFA and EDR and see where you are. You're going to be in a far better place than if you didn't have those things, right? So start there. Now, if I do those things and then I want to talk about framework and maturity and where this fits in, okay, fine. Like, take care of this stuff first because look at what people are actually experiencing for losses. Look at what is actually biting people on the butt and look at the mechanisms that are used to affect those things and mitigate those. And you're looking at my four hills, right? You're looking at the real basic stuff. So start there. Then analyze your environment, whatever you think, whatever's unique. Because quite honestly, I mean, if you're Boeing, you care about a whole lot of different stuff. You're a target of nation state level attackers, right? And if you're heavily dependent on intellectual property, then you know it. Like those are your crown jewels. But guess what? Those environments need MFA just as much as anyone else. So start there and then start doing other stuff. Like as I mentioned, like the chances of me caring about, even bigger things like internal patching of whatever when I don't have MFA, like I'm gonna focus all my efforts on MFA because that can be done quickly. Generally speaking, it depends. If you have no MFA and 300,000 users, it's going to take a minute, right? But in large extent, you can do some of these things pretty rapidly with effective leadership. This is not a technology problem, right? And so that's really where it started from was what is the most effective thing that I can do quickly? Okay, what's the second thing? What's the third thing? And I saw it work. And we see it from Verizon Data Breach Report and other things like that. Like, hey, guys, do MFA. It's a big deal. Really big. And can you get to 100% MFA coverage? Yes, you can. Right? Are there even, oh, well, we can't use it. Yeah, I run call centers. I get it. I understand how that works. Right? So maybe you compromise and you say, okay, all 100% MFA for any external access. Okay. Or let's roll a hardware key, YubiKeys. Or like there's some mechanism by which you can dramatically strengthen your authentication for 100% of your users. Do it.
Okay, great. That's a very great approach or perspective behind your rationale in terms of actually selecting this particular approach. Now, the fact is that organizations differ, which you have actually mentioned, and
Yep.
based on what the data, for example, the Verizon data breach report states, no doubt it actually highlights a number of areas in which organizations are actually breached and also the necessary control mechanisms that actually need to be implemented. So the question in all of this is, do you conduct a thorough risk assessment of your environment to see, all right, these are the necessary risks, and then apply the appropriate controls as part of your approach? Or do you, by default, actually look at, for example, that report and then identify those common control mechanisms and then apply it to your environment?
Yeah. So I'm not opposed to formal someone coming in and doing a risk assessment. Um, that said, I find it way more valuable to do that by having one-on-ones with all of the execs and all the other people and say, where do we make money? How do we make money? How much money do we make here? What's our margins? What's the risk? And talking to people and forming relationships and enabling them to operate safely and securely. Right? Um, that's my approach, as opposed to, oh, I'm going to pay someone to come do a risk assessment. And what they're going to do is they're going to do it based on a framework or whatever else. But I don't really care about all that until I know the business really, really well. Once I know the business really well, then I think I think the natural flow of that will prioritize or will you'll be able to map your suggested controls against what matters to the business, right? Like I know availability in this section of the business is dramatically important to the overall health of the company, way more than confidentiality over on this little minor part of the business, right? So where am I going to spend my time? Where am I going to focus? I'm going to focus on the big deals, not the little deals, right? Now, once I take care of some of the big deals, maybe I'll have time to go look at some other stuff. That's fine. And that's really where I am now, right? I took care of the big deals, took care of the big stuff. That's all good, right? So now it's like, well, how do I prioritize between this and this kind of medium things. It's like, well, we got to do it all. So pick one, go with it. Like move fast. So I have a bias for action, right? A definite bias for action. Like don't talk about it too long. Just freaking go do it, right? And let the knowledge of the business dictate where you go focus. Now, could that be more mature? Absolutely. In fact, it's really where I spend a lot of my mental effort right now is trying to prioritize, trying to have more data backed decisions. But in the meantime, like let's just go knock it out. Like, yeah, that's a problem. Knock it out. In 3 weeks, knock it out. 4 weeks, something like that. Okay, that. And I'm always concerned about the like 90 or 95% solution that I can get to quickly. And then I'll come back through. I'll come back through 6 months, a year later, whatever, and say, okay, so we applied email retention to all but 5 people. Out of 10,000 employees, we applied to all but 5 people. Okay, let's do that. We can do that next week, a month from now, whatever, something like that, right? Knock that out. Okay, now will I come back and review those 5 people? Sure, I will. But like, I knocked out the 99% problem in a month, or retention, or DOP, or you name it. Like, give me the most value that I can get as quickly as possible, and then we'll tune and tweak. Because if I'm in a conversation with anyone, with any of my execs, be like, yeah, so reasonably, like, no one would think that this could happen, but if it does, I'd like to talk about it. And that can be things outside cyber. I can be like, hey, what happens if a tsunami hits Manila? Oh, whew. Now that's a 1 in 500 year thing, but is it worth a discussion if that happened? Yeah, because what happens if power gets cut to our building and the generator is not? Well, we at least talked about the really, really bad thing. So the just kind of bad thing, we can probably handle that, right? That is a great conversation to be in rather than firefighting. Do I have ransomware going on right now? Like, I want to get rid of as many urgent things as possible so that with a calm head, we can all, one, have a great quality of life, and two, we can focus on all these things on an intellectual level rather than on a firefighting level. Firefighting sucks. It puts your brain, it puts everything into a bad place, right? Calmly looking, be like, okay, we took care of these things. We're going to talk about these things, and we'll knock them out as soon as we can. That's a great place to be, right? But you've got to have confidence. Like, the question that always comes up is like, well, how sure are you? Are you sure there's no bad guys in your environment? Are you sure you've considered all the risks? How confident are you? You're a pretty confident dude, Brent. That's cool. That's great for you. But what if you're wrong? I'm smart enough to know that I should not be trusted 100%. I'm smart enough to know that I'm a human being, and that makes me not really, really good at risk, at judging risk. Now, I tend to think I'm not terrible, and I think I can kind of quantify that to some degree, right? But that's where I actually am thankful for high-end threat groups that I face, because I get free red teams constantly, because I have a one step below nation state level threat group that targets me specifically because of my client, or one of my clients. That's awesome. They're perpetually knocking on the door. They're perpetually trying to do. And I see them not get in cyber-wise. I see them get in via fraud. Okay. You pay people to do bad stuff. Okay. I can deal with that. And I get higher assessments done that are really good, right? Not just check the box. And they come back and validate the same thing. I can do POVs with really cool, awesome vendors who do crazy amounts of awesome stuff and have them go, yeah, looks pretty solid. Or, yeah, you might want to consider this. Okay. So I'll take all these external validating factors to look and say, am I missing anything? And that's where I spend a lot of time. But guess what? When you're fighting fires, when you're fighting fires, or when you're just devoting a big chunk of time to finding, detecting, catching, stopping bad guys, then you're not able to focus on what ifs. You're not able to focus on what am I missing. You're not able to have a conversation with an external person or someone listening to this podcast who goes, have you thought about blah? Yes, I have, or no, I haven't. And that's one of the reasons why I talk to so many vendors, because I go, I believe A, B, and C. If you know D, E, and F, let's talk about it. Like, absolutely. Like, what am I missing? And I probably say a couple hundred times a year to different people across the industry, across vendors, internal, external, external. I go through and I'm like, what am I missing? What should I look at? I say that to my execs. I say that to my peers. I say that to my team. I say that to vendors. Everyone. I'm like, what am I missing? And in the council of many, there's wisdom. So I
Yeah,
like it.
sure. You have actually answered a number of questions that I would have actually, alluded to, not to mention in terms of actually gaining the support of the executives, gaining their confidence in what it is that you're actually doing. Um, but one of the questions in all of this, well, very important, is the fact that you have actually pointed out the process of actually eliminating the risk within your environment so that you're actually spending enough time concentrating on those areas that are very important, that prioritization process in terms of dealing with risks that are most important to the business and the executives, not just about the systems or the different mechanisms that you have running within an environment. Because oftentimes I see where security practitioners they go off on a particular tangent to say, all right, our internet facing servers have 50 vulnerabilities. These are risks to the
Yeah.
organization. When in fact these are not really risks to the business,
No.
based on the fact that you might have maybe a particular framework outdated, it might not be an impact to the business immediately. So that's
Yeah.
a very good approach to prioritizing risks, which can be quite challenging for
Yeah.
many
And
individuals.
there's, I mean, hey, there's stuff that compliance says thou shall, and I do, right? I mean, I don't have a choice in the matter. And it's not that it's a bad thing, even like vulnerability management. It's not a bad thing by any means. Absolutely, go yeah. We should patch. We should do vulnerability management. We should have policies. We should do all the things, right? All the things are not worthless by any means. They're just not where I start the conversation. And when I do the basics, the risk posed by those things is reduced, right? It's not zero, but it's reduced. And a reduced risk allows me to not have an urgency about it. So, do I care? Yes. Do we make progress? Yes. Do we meet all sorts of compliance and regulatory requirements? Absolutely, right? No doubt, full stop. Um, but I also, like, as a CISO, I don't want to worry about the day to day running of that stuff. I want it to be fairly well defined. And what I tell my team all the time is I am completely opposed to doing work without progress, right? I'm all about progress. Like, so all too often, right? Vulnerability management is a prime example where it's like, hey, did you patch that? Hey, did you patch that? Hey, did you patch that? Like, I don't want to be that guy asking people. I don't want to be the guy on the other side or gal getting bugged all the time by patching. Like, that's annoying. No one wants to live that life. So yes, we have to have a program. Yes, we do. But I am also going to IT leadership and people be like, hey, I'm going to have a crazy statement. I would like to patch 90+% of the estate automatically. Is that crazy? And they're like, it's kind of crazy. I'm like, okay, why? Like, I've seen it done in very, very large environments. So let's figure out what it takes to get us there, because that way I don't want my people going, hey, hey, hey. I don't want you getting annoyed at my people going, hey, hey, hey. No one wants to spend time doing this. Like, let's spend our time doing other stuff and automate that. Cool? Like, yeah. I'm like, there's a technical solution here. We have the technology to do this. It may be difficult to do, or it may be a little bit difficult people process wise, but we'll work through that. And again, if I'm not worried about like catching bad guys as much, I can do that. And I can go to IT and say, hey, I want to enable you to automate some of this work. Cool? Yeah, awesome. Let's do it. I don't know how to do it, but I know it can be done. So let's talk. Great place to be.
Yeah, sure.
It also makes for a more enjoyable work environment, honestly. Like you're working
Exactly.
on good stuff.
I like that approach in terms of having that machinery and that approach in place. Because so often security teams are actually burdened or bombarded with so many what we classified as unnecessary alerts. So that
Yeah.
prevents them from actually focusing on those important issues, priorities within the organization. Importantly, so far you have mentioned that this approach of catching the bad guys, you have MFA, you have device posture management, you have EDR, you have external vulnerabilities patch, you have red team assessment. So in all of this, person might say that how challenging has it been, or was it in terms of actually implementing these mechanisms within your organization?
So so it has not been difficult, but I also interviewed specifically for an environment in which I could succeed. So in my interview, I was talking to the CIO and I said, hey, like, uh, let's say I need to deploy an agent on 10,000 hosts for whatever thing, whatever reason. How long do you think that would take? And he's like, can you give me a week? I was like, that works. It wasn't like, oh, another freaking agent. No. It wasn't a big debate. Like, I enable him, he enables me, right? So, as part of that, like, now, it's a very favorable, it was a favorable environment to go into from a relationship perspective, right? And I had a role in that too. It's not that I entirely got lucky, but I come in and start talking about enabling the business, and I'm echoing what other people are already saying. So that's good. And I go, hey, how good are we on MFA? It's like, we're pretty good. Okay. And we were substantially there, right? There were a couple little things. And then it's like, well, you know what? We got some people who have SMS, and we're gonna kill that. Okay. And then it was so like that was a project, and it's like, all right, let's go do that. Okay. And then it's like, hey guys, can we tie the VPN authentication to Azure AD? And that enables us to use not only the VPN host check thing, but it enables us to use Microsoft conditional access. Can we do that? Yeah, we got to think about it a bit. Okay, that's fine. So knock that out pretty quick, right? And then it says you must be domain joined. And I start rolling out YubiKeys. I'm like, hey, we're going to force YubiKey to be used. Okay, yeah, we can do that. And it's like, hey, by the way, what's our external attack service? Oh, it's this. Do we do a lot of M&A? No. Do we stand up cloud? No. Okay. Tell you what, once a month, I want someone to get on the phone with me, and we're going to walk through the external attack service, and I'm going to see the results that it's all clean until I'm confident of that. Okay. Hey, how do we make sure that we have 100% EDR coverage? We can't just trust the EDR console. So how do we? Oh well, you know what? I can throw some gift cards at my guys and gals and have them script some stuff up to compare this, that, and this tool, and say where's the white space, and cut a ticket and figure this out. Okay, so all of those things didn't take that long. But it also didn't take long because it wasn't, none of this is a technical challenge, right? All these things we have the technology for. These things are leadership, people process things. And when you come in and you're enabling the business, and you're pretty easy to get along with, and you're asking for pretty reasonable things that save people time and effort, it works out pretty good, right? Now, we're also we're doing PAM right now. Guess what? AD is a complicated beast. It takes a lot longer to do PAM. It takes a while to work through some of the tech debt. It takes a while to work through like why is this? Oh, why is it? That's harder. And again, it's not even the technology, just people process. It takes longer to work through some of these things. Some are really, really, really easy. Some are more difficult, but you work through it. So it was easy for me. It didn't take that long, but that was also because I came into an environment that was hospitable to that, but I interviewed specifically for that environment in which I could succeed, right? Like some environments are more difficult than others. And but I think that it's not only the environment you're in, but I think it's the environment that you create too. Like I think CISOs are in a unique position to help dictate and help form company culture, organizational culture around enabling the business. And I think that there are plenty of, like any profession, there are some who are better at creating culture and some who are not as good at creating and establishing and changing culture. And it can be super challenging. It just happens to be something that I've thought about and worked on for 20 years. So it's,
I really like that approach. You've actually made a number of points there that could actually take us into a whole different nature of conversation. Is the fact that you choose in terms of selecting the organizations that you actually get
oh, yeah.
into. That's a very important point, as well as actually having the necessary support to help you to implement and to develop the programs that you want. I mean, when you talk
Yeah.
about so many environments are not really the way we want it to be as security professionals. So that's also a very important point there.
Yeah. And that sounds like a great future conversation. But that's one
Yeah,
reason why I love my background in sales because it's all sales, right? I mean, and it's not like used car salesman. It's like understanding the business and articulating value. Like that's good. That like that it's a win. No matter who you are, no matter what the organization is, that's a win. And if you cannot do that or you're not willing to learn how to do that, well then you're not going to be as effective, right? And part of that is just a personality characteristic of perpetually asking, how can I do this better? What's working? What's not working? Look at other people with like that's why whenever I look at like the big picture of cybersecurity and the industry, I tend to not think that a framework is the answer, right? I tend to think that, you mentioned several times the word confidence, right? 100% agree. Confidence, trust, these are emotions. Emotions don't get changed by head knowledge, generally speaking, right? So emotions, how is my ELT? How do they trust me? How do they have confidence in me? Well, that's an emotional thing. It's not only just a facts, figures, knowledge thing. So I need to be thinking about that. Like as a CISO, I should spend my time reading leadership books, not diving into the details of bug reports or whatever else. And I have a pretty good amount of mental bandwidth, and I don't have the mental bandwidth to do all of that. Like, I don't have access to any of my team's tools because if I did, I'd be chasing down rabbit holes all the time. And that's not my value. That's not me, right? Not anymore. Now my value is thinking about culture and leadership and psychology and negotiation and people and all this stuff. That's where my value is. Not like and it doesn't denigrate any of that. It's just that I did that for a long time. That's not my jam. I have very, very good people who do that stuff. And I love them and I trust them. And I'll go do this stuff if they go do that stuff. Works out well.
that's a very interesting note to actually end this awesome conversation. I mean, you have actually mentioned so many things that we could actually segue into so much in terms of the detail as it
Yeah.
involves the overall developing a comprehensive security program. But very important in the mix of all of this, know that you have your security program, you have identified all of these controls, you have gained the trust, the confidence, the buy-in from the necessary executives. One of the key questions in all of this is, what are your metrics that you use to determine the effectiveness, so that when you report to the CISO, sorry, the executive, they're actually getting a true reflection of the effectiveness of your
Yeah,
security program?
I don't have one. I don't have a metric, and I have a hard time because I've done a lot of metrics in my career, and metrics are at best, in my experience, a sometimes very useful data point, but they're not the end all be all. And for any given thing, like an operations center or help desk or whatever else, like I have a hard time finding metrics that indicate badass. And badass is not just a performance thing, but it's also like a trust thing, right? Like it's someone who does execute the job really, really well, but also someone that I trust and want to work with, right? And so I look a little bit at skew metrics. And so I don't like metrics, but I like kind of with my LT, the conversation I have with my CEO is one, partially based on him, but also based on other stakeholders, other executives. Like, what do they think of me? Do they feel like we're addressing all things? Because when I go, if I have my chief legal officer and he's like, I think that we have a pretty good handle on the risks that we face, and the CFO says that, and the COO, and the CIO, and all my peers, and I was like, I kind of think so too. Is that great? No, but it's something. I would much rather be judged by that intangible feeling kind of metric than by like patching SLA rates or something like that, like some operational metric. Um, the other intangible things they ask are like, have we suffered a loss from something that I did not call out? Like if I say, hey, this is a risk, and we say, okay, we're going to accept it, and then it happens, I'm like, well, okay, like we accepted it. But if I don't say anything, if no one knew that was a risk, if I'm like, shit, I didn't know that was going to happen, I didn't know that was even a possibility of happening. Hey, man, nail me to the wall. That's my job, right? And how do I have confidence that we're doing that? That's a hard problem. And I think a lot of that will surround cyber risk quantification, which is a whole nother ball of wax. And you have a lot of CISOs go, can't be done, can't quantify risk, not for me. And aggregate you can, not for me. I don't know about that. I'm really wrestling with that. So right now I'm working a lot on conversations about risk tolerance, risk acceptance, and frankly, risk quantification as a means to prioritize and say, we feel that we have adequately addressed all the risks that people are actually suffering loss from. That's what I want to do. Are there still black swan events? Yes, there are, right? But things that people are actually experiencing loss on, we have covered all of that enough to a level that is acceptable to our business, given our risk tolerance and our risk acceptance. And cyber is just one piece of that, right? I mean, there's natural disaster, there's legislation, there's regulation, there's all these risks. And quite honestly, I'm not there yet. As a CISO, I'm not there yet. As an organization, I think very, very few CISOs, very few organizations are really there yet that any metric is actually meaningful to the risk the organization faces. I think it's possible, but I think there's like very few people doing that. And I'm not there yet, but I'm getting there. Getting there. But I'm putting in the mental work. Putting in the mental work to get there.
Well, guys, there you have it. Catch the bad guys early program. Brent, it was a pleasure. It was awesome having this conversation. I mean, the value that you have actually shared with us today is quite, I mean, invaluable. So, I mean, so happy to have you.
All right. Thank you very much for having me. Always fun. Always fun.
Great. And I look forward to many more conversations like this. And to be resilient, guys, then you must have a plan, a strategy, a program. the necessary resources and support from your executives. So, guys, until then, same time, same place. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you.
Great.